Welcome to story time. I love that we get to meet in this way, that we can connect, not just in real time at the 12 o'clock hour on a Tuesday, but anytime that we need a little accountability for pausing to be in this moment. And that's the nature of the practice of yoga. And it's truly the purpose of why I offer story time and all the practices that I offer here at Life's Work Yoga. Now, today is story time, so welcome. I'm glad you're here. And the story that I want to share is both one of my past and one of the more recent present. And in my reflection, in my self-study these past few weeks, I've had to come back around to my own relationship with tapas. Tapas is the Sanskrit word, the second, according to the Sutras, the second niyama, which is the second principle of Patanjali's 8-limbed path. So this little book is one of my go-to guides when I just want to dive a little deeper into Sanskrit. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, and honestly, I don't really have a great desire to be a Sanskrit scholar, but I do love the etymology, the source of understanding words, not only because they help me understand the language of yoga, but because they help me with new language to understand the story that is my living. So tapas, according to Lisa Lowitz and Rima Datta, is the burning zeal, desire to achieve self-realization, purification, the practice of discipline, and the cultivation of a fiery spirit. We burn through the ego, practice endurance, building strength, stamina, and wisdom. Understand that discipline is a form of self-care, not self-deprivation. I'm going to come back to that because the truth is my story has an overabundance of getting shit done. And for a long time, that fueled my identity, that fueled my sense of worthiness, and in turn, also solidified some of the hurdles and obstacles of when I felt unworthy or not enough, when I couldn't do the things that were on my list. Now, I am so efficient and so practiced, hence good, at scheduling, color coding, creating timelines and agendas. I'm really quite gifted at doing that because I've done it a lot. There are times in my story where literally I can schedule with color-coded diagrams within 15-minute increments starting from 6 o'clock in the morning until about 10 o'clock at night, in which case I would finally allow myself to sleep. Meaning every 15 minutes was accounted for. Now, I'm not saying that that is a good, healthy strategy for living, but it is a good skill to have when needed. It's the kind of push that helped me overcome obstacles and hurdles when big projects needed to be accomplished. Where my downfall in those stories, whether it's writing my dissertation, right, in which case not so long ago, I stayed up all night and then took care of the kids, took a nap, stayed up all night, alternating back and forth in order to find the time to do the things of being mom and housekeeper and partner and full-time my own business in addition to full-time studying on the doctoral level. In order to fit all that into my life, what I sacrificed was what I would now say is my priority of the self-care. And again, those strategies served me, but they also made it more difficult for me to truly embody two of my favorite concepts that are inherent to the practices of self-care that facilitate joy, the 10 practices that I teach in Yoga Living. And those two, little nuance, are rest and play. See, what happens when you overcommit, when you overschedule, is that for me, it meant that I diminished the value of free time, which allows for play. Now, I would schedule and coordinate social time or story time, bedtime with the kids, and rationalize that that was good enough. And in the season, it may be, right? When we are surviving the traumas, whether they're self-induced or whether they are environmental or cultural or out of our control, when we're surviving, when we're in survival mode, we do whatever we need to do. But again, here's the downfall, is recognizing that when we push that edge, we need to then take an equal, if not bigger, step back to allow for true, full recovery, rehabilitation. Now, the Yoga Sutras, as at least translated by another one of my teachers, Rolf Gates, says that self-discipline, tapas, burns away impurities and kindles the sparks of divinity. Now, that's what the Yoga Sutra says. And translated and interpreted primarily by men, it can often lead to that energy of push, the sun's energy, the heat and the fire, the tapas that we in the modern world equate to getting shit done. And yet, it's not just about getting shit done. It's about getting the right shit done in the time that still honors the fundamental primary objective, which, if you remember from Patanjali, and as I've self-disclosed, is the self-care, compassion, and truth, the yamas from Patanjali. So in that sense, I love that Rima Datta and Lisa Lowitz, two female yoga perspectives, cultivate or they conclude this tapas definition with this idea that understanding that discipline is a form of self-care, not self-deprivation, and certainly not justified self-harm. And that's the lesson that I continue to practice, integrating into my life. And what I mean by that is, some of you already know this, that I was lucky enough to catch COVID just a little under 2 weeks ago, in which, because of the protocols and the honoring of those protocols, I essentially quarantined in my house for just shy of 2 weeks in order to, one, not facilitate a further spread of this virus, but also because I wasn't well. I was so unwell that I could do little more than sleep and read, eating on occasion. Now, because of this story, this history of tapas, one of my go-to thoughts was, oh, here's that extra push that I can help lose the weight that I gained in the last couple of years between COVID and surgeries and all that other kind of age-appropriate weight gain. I thought, oh, here I am. My throat is sore. I can't swallow. I'm just living on essentially oatmeal and applesauce. I'm definitely going to lose those last few pounds. And then I also had to recognize that healing is hard work. And resting is just one, let's call it, pillar of restoration and healing and recovery. Eating well, having kind thoughts, and resting comprise that sense of, can I create a calm, abiding space to allow for deeper, greater ease? So what does that mean? Well, it means that I'm still recovering. I had my first day back to the studio on Friday and had a full day. But then I pretty much had to take a nap in the middle of the day, short nap, in order to fit around my client schedules. And then again on Saturday and on Sunday and on Monday, sleep 8 or so hours in the evening and take a good solid couple-hour nap in the middle of the day. And for someone driven to get shit done, this is a discipline in of itself, to practice self-care, to practice rest, to practice the non-doing, which in turn is also a deeper practice of undoing some of the habits that led me perhaps to a bit of a depletion in my immune system, as well as my emotional stability when I in fact learned that I was positive for COVID. That those first 24 hours, this is why I know I still need to practice not just yoga, but essentially the practice of ahimsa. Because those first 24 hours of being diagnosed and affirmed to be positive with COVID, I was flooded with guilt and with shame and with regret and remorse and disappointment and self-loathing, which is not helpful to the healing process for sure. And it certainly wasn't accurate or honest to the fact that this is a highly contagious virus. And I was doing everything within my control and even above and beyond in terms of what is recommended at this stage in the practice to keep myself safe. The irony, in fact, is that just 2.5 days before I was exposed to COVID is when I got my second booster. Recommended, not required, of course, but recommended for folks over the age of 50. Now, fortunately, I had already scheduled my husband's vaccination booster 2.5 weeks prior. So I think he was able to stay healthy and therefore care for me because I had done the preemptive work of scheduling those vaccinations. And so by about the second, maybe not even to the third day, and with the help of my husband and my practice, my gratitude practice, my daily Dosha Shalada, which, trust me when I say it looked very different than what I do in the studio, right? But the daily breathing was literally, can I take 10 slow, deep breaths through my nose? And some days the answer was no. And some days the answer was kind of, but only in one side, right? So there's lots of nuance that I was able to explore because I practiced being intimate with the practice in my body. But it's in that transition of doing what I was able to do, adjusted for my energy level, adjusted for the space and the quarantine of being in my bed, and yet starting to recognize all of the work that I did in the months and even years prior to COVID entering my home, as far as having a quarantine plan, having soups on the pantry shelf, which is really credit to Peter, having tests available, being aware of the signs and a strategy within my family and how we would address this inevitability in so many ways. And so by having that practice of mindful attention, by taking care of myself, at least to the level of which my capacity, which did reflect and still does reflect my own negative junk that still lives in my tissues, the issues that remind me that I am still in process. But all of that said, without the practice, I know from past experiences that it would have taken me a whole lot longer to get back to that sense of calm abiding, allowing and accepting the fate of my illness if I wasn't doing the daily practice. How do I know that? Well, because in past, it's taken me a lot longer to accept my own diagnoses, whether it's physical, emotional, mental exhaustion, whether it's a virus or a bacteria, whether it's a need for surgery or just a need for a mental break. This was a rather quick turnaround for me. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that I was able to not only initiate protocols early on, but then to sustain them and rather quickly, within 24 hours, shed my own self-loathing and guilt with some encouragement from my community, my circle, my husband, my partner, and my gratitude practice to reframe the truth, the reality from a perspective of compassion. So That's the practice, and I'm sticking to it, my friends. Every time I hit an obstacle, a hurdle, is an invitation to look more clearly at what is, and can I be with it? In fact, in our book study that we're reading right now, it reminds me of how Yogi shares the idea that this practice, this meditation from the Buddhist perspective, is the training of the mind. He says that the practice, the process of meditation is essentially to cultivate the awareness, because it's in that awareness that we have the power to choose what we pay attention to and how we respond, how we frame that truth, that reality, even if it is still skewed by our own perceptions. But it's the practice that then facilitates the byproducts or the results, the gifts, the consequences of that practice. And it's those that remind us that this is worth it. And what are those practices? What are those rewards that we reap from the practice? Well, Yogi says it's joy, clarity, and inner peace. In fact, he goes so far as to caution that if we are in fact pursuing inspiration or pursuing joy, that becomes the goal and can often hijack our ability to do the practice. As my teacher says, Jonathan Faust, that meditation makes us accident prone. Meditation doesn't make us immune to the viruses of the world, be they COVID or negative self-talk or fear and anger. Meditation just simply helps us to cultivate that pause, to be aware of what is here in this moment, so that we can choose with more compassion, choose with more wisdom, more access, and in doing so, experience more joy, more love, more hope in the waiting. So, where are you at with your journey of allowing and finding that pause for awareness? Maybe you too are in a season of recovering from your get shit done attitude or practice of habits. I don't know if I'll ever be rid of my overindulgence, my overworking, but I'm going to continue to share with you all month long some perspectives on how to cultivate a healthy relationship with tapas. And maybe, just maybe, this deeper dive can be of assistance not just for my study of compassion balanced with tapas, but maybe even for yours. The truth is, most of my clients, most of my coaching clients, my training students, kind of hover on one end of this spectrum or the other, in the sense that they are get shit done kind of folks. They're over committed and over involved and don't allow time for introspection, for play, for rest. Or they're kind of spinning too much on their plate and they're changing, shifting gears, never feeling like they actually get anything done because they're shifting or multitasking. And it's these two expressions of a confused understanding of tapas that I can best support, because that's where I live, right? And we teach, we share, and we can benefit each other by that sharing and connecting what we've learned along the way. Thanks for letting me reflect and to share a little bit about how I got here and a little bit about where I hope that I'm going in terms of compassion and self-care, yes, but also in redefining tapas to embrace the practice of compassion and self-care, so that we're here for the long haul to do the deep work of connecting and embracing our own imperfections in this journey to live vibrantly. May you breathe deeply and move freely, so you may labor lovingly and know the joy, the peace, the vibrancy of living intimately with prana. May you live vibrantly. Namaste.